You know that old saying, be kind, rewind? Well, the past 6.5 episodes, folks, you have been kind, and you have listened to Retro Wrestling Rewind. You thought the first 6.5 episodes were great? You ain't heard nothing yet. Episode 7 could be the best one yet, as we cover Starrcade 1985, The Gathering, and it begins now. Welcome in to Retro Wrestling Rewind, episode number 7. As always, I am one half of undoubtedly the greatest combination ever to do a podcast. I am David Fine, alongside my co-host and tag team partner in this venture, Alex G. Man, how are you doing this week, Alex?
Pretty good. Can't complain at all.
I mean, it's been a weird week, but speaking of weird things,
I took vacation last week. I'm actually shocked. I know you were shocked when you heard this, that they actually let me out of prison. So
well, it is kind of weird to do a podcast from my studios to prison. It's just weird, you know. I mean, I'm glad they let you out. But speaking of weird things, we're talking about Starrcade 85, The Gathering. Leading up to Starrcade 85, they set up all the matches. The first thing I want to talk about, and then we'll kind of go into the lead up. What were your thoughts? And I know you have some great thoughts on this, but the Hands of Stone, Ron Garvin, dressing up as a woman.
Again, he's always dressing up like women. All the time. You'll see it here. You'll see it in a couple of years when it's him and Flair in the hotel room. He's always dressing like women. I heard on an interview that he actually enjoys it. So it is what it is. Kind of odd here because you have your Midnight Express who've been in for a little while, right? Again, they're keeping the Midnights and the Rock and Roll apart. But for their first Starrcade, for their first big match in this territory, they're taking on good old Ron Garvin here. And they're taking on Jimmy Valiant, which is like, no, why?
I mean, the thing... Sadly,
Jimmy was over and Ronnie's over, right? They're both over. We know this. We went through this. I've seen crowd reactions, right? They were over. Midnight Express coming in, you want to put some heat on these guys? You put them with Jimmy, really? And Ronnie?
But the weird thing is, comparatively speaking, Miss Atlanta Lively, Ronnie Garvin dressed up as a woman, and Big Mama. Big Mama, I know she's still alive, and for some strange reason, if she's actually runs across this podcast, I don't want to say anything.
She listens to all the podcasts.
I don't want to say anything, disparaging or mean, but
I'm just saying this. Let's say this: she's a woman of the streets. And
yes.
She's the woman in the sheets.
Moving
She'll turn
on.
you out. She'll turn you out. That's the bottom line. We know this. Why do you think Jimmy was with her?
I mean, she seems kind of top heavy, but that's neither here nor
there. I don't know how she didn't tip over.
I mean,
she had years and years of back problems.
That's neat. Well, I'm sure she lays down
true.
A lot, but that's true. Beside the point. Moving on, the build up to Starrcade 85, The Gathering. What were your thoughts on the build-up? I mean, they built up, Barbarian. He was supposed to have this, the arm wrestling challenge with Superstar.
We're going to talk about that nonsense in a second.
Superstar Graham.
I want to talk about how there's a couple things leading into this event. Now, people have to understand and realize that this is the first indication of what Jim Crockett Promotions would be moving forward. Again, don't forget, in March of 1985, basically a week after, it depends on who you believe, but either a week before or a week after WrestleMania, the WWE, Vince McMahon, sells their time slot on TBS for World Championship Wrestling to the Crockett's. It should have went to Watts, but that's a whole nother story for a different podcast. So not only do you have Crockett appearing on TBS for the first time, in addition, you still have Ole's show from the fake Georgia Championship Wrestling, also that Crockett's going to eventually take over. And then you have Watts' show also on TBS floating around doing nonsense. Now, understand this. There's a reason why there's Starrcade in 2 different locations here. It's very, very important. Again, you have the Omni, which is in Atlanta, right? And you have the Greensboro Coliseum. The prior two Starrcades were at the Greensboro Coliseum. We know this, we understand this, right? So one of the big things that people need to realize prior to the Flair heel turn, Flair was a babyface all through 84, all through 85, up until this moment, sort of, kind of. Now understand how the NWA World Champion is still working. Now Flair clearly is a babyface on Crockett TV. He's teaming with Blackjack Mulligan and Dusty Rhodes, and they're feuding with Buddy Landel and Tully Blanchard and blah blah blah. Right? We know this, right? Here's the thing. Everywhere else in the country, for the most part, Flair would come in as a heel. He'd come into Dallas. He would come into Mid-South. He would come into Florida as a heel. And technically, this is where it gets weird, everybody. Technically, if you go watch the TBS shows, Flair's more heelish. He's still not a full heel. He's more heelish on the TBS shows than he is on the Crockett syndicated shows. Those two shows, and it will go on for years and years and years, up until even into the mid-90s, those shows kind of are independent of each other, sort of, kind of. Like, they take place in, like, an alternate dimensions from each other. So it's very strange. Again, don't forget that Starrcade 84 main event was Dusty Rhodes versus Ric Flair. That's a babyface versus babyface match.
Yeah.
Understand that. And now Flair has gone full heel, right? Dusty has come in to save Flair from the Russians in the cage. And you have Ole and Arn came in and they beat the hell out of Rhodes, and it was almost a riot, and it was craziness, and they're finally getting some heat on Dusty.
I mean, of course.
Now, the interesting part that you guys got to realize here is that the Dusty Rhodes versus Ric Flair match, the title switch, air quotes, we'll talk about that in a freaking minute. The title switch happens not in Greensboro, because you know what would happen if it was in Greensboro. They would have been cheering Flair. You know this. We all got that, right?
Yeah.
And they do it in Atlanta. Now, in Atlanta, Dusty's a god, much like in Florida. So that is the build to this event. Again, if you look at this event in a vacuum, this event, the overall match is better than WrestleMania 1 and a hell of a lot better than WrestleMania 2. So a great card from top to bottom for the most part on this show.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great show. And, you know, kind of before we get into the whole entire show, I mean, God rest his soul, Dusty Rhodes was never the biggest guy. I mean, well, he was the biggest guy. I mean, he wasn't muscular. He was not slim, but God, he could cut one hell of a promo. I mean, this was one of the Hard Times promo. He was like Ric Flair. You've never seen Hard Times.
By the way, no one saw until I go to the first time it started really coming out was like when tapes started coming out, but that was on a Crockett syndicated show. That wasn't on TBS.
Oh, it was not. See, folks, you have to listen each and every week to Retro Wrestling. You wouldn't have known that if you
because no one knew about no Hard Times. Like I'm up here in New York. I don't know about no Hard Times. I didn't see that until the late '90s. I'm getting tapes. I'm like, what the hell is this? And then they put it on that Flair DVD that the WWE released. You're like, holy crap! Look at this.
I mean, speaking of the Andersons, Ole and Arn Anderson, of course, they're. You know, Marty Lundy from Rome, Georgia, Arn Anderson, and of course they have Cousin Rick. I'm not sure how that plays into anything, but he's the current, well, actually he's not even the current. He's the TV champion. He has the belt, even though he is not technically the TV champion because it's held up and they're going to have a tournament and I think in Atlanta to crown the new champion.
Because they got 65 belts because they're absorbing territories. Like it's like they're going out of business, literally.
Well, yeah. I mean, soon they're going to. I mean, they were buying up belts like Vince McMahon buys up territories now. But that's neither here nor there. But did you see in the weeks leading up? I think it was on maybe the third week leading up that I watched how Arn referenced the Four Horsemen, and this was a couple of months before the actual formation of said horsemen. What were your thoughts on that?
The horsemen don't really essentially form until early '86. Now, I guess it wasn't necessarily about the horse. I thought it wasn't necessarily about the horsemen. It was about the Andersons and Flair and maybe their buddies, right? Mm-hmm. They're all sick and tired of Dusty Rhodes' nonsense. They don't like Dusty Rhodes. They're not really big on Magnum TA either. But it is a foreshadowed reference here when you go back and look at it, which is very interesting. I think what's interesting is, prior to this is when Ole turns heel originally. Now, Ole turns heel on Thunderbolt Patterson because Arn Anderson is into the territory. So he's watching Arn's matches and like, look at this kid. This kid's amazing. And Ole is currently teaming up with Thunderbolts, and he cuts probably one of the most brilliant promos I've ever seen in my entire life. He cuts it. It's him and Thunderbolt, and they will do this promo again when they kick Sting out of the Horseman. So it's basically a promo that he's seeing Arn in the ring. It's like, I see what it is. I see what it can be. And then he cuts his promo on Patterson, and he's like, we're friends. We're tag team partners. So I'm gonna let this slide one time, but I'm gonna team with him. If you got a problem with it, I'm gonna kick your ass. And he says the most menacing thing I ever heard in my entire life is where, like, he slightly nudges over to Thunderbolt, and Thunderbolt kind of flinches. He's like, hey, don't worry, I'm not gonna touch you, not yet. And it's literally the most menacing thing I've ever heard in my entire life. He does that same exact promo when he kicks Sting out of the Horseman.
Yeah, I mean, Ole, I mean, on the scale of 1 to really good, what were your thoughts on his promos back in the day? I mean, he could cut a mean heel promo. I mean,
he's as a heel, he's a 10, but where he's super underrated is a babyface, because he's like a 7 or 8 on the babyface scale. Like, if you go watch those Georgia tapes from the early '80s, in between his heel runs, his babyface runs are like amazing.
Yeah, I mean, and speaking, I mean, kind of changing topics on, going from.
It's the way it works. It's the way it works.
Going from a great wrestler to a wrestler who.
Are we going to talk about Sam Houston? Is that what we're doing right now?
No, we're not talking about your boyfriend, Sam Houston.
Oh.
We are talking about Thunderfoot. He was managed by the great James J. Dillon.
Can I ask a question? I have a question.
Yes.
Now, there's Thunderfoot 1 and Thunderfoot 2, right?
Correct.
Collectively, are they known as the Thunderfeet?
Yes, they are. And
no,
actually,
you're lying.
Yeah, and actually, the original Thunderfoot is actually a wrestler named Joel Deaton, who was actually wrestling out of Georgia in one of the promotions that I ring announced for, but that's for another time. But what were your thoughts on the Thunderfoot? I mean, they kind of made him over, but then later on down the road,
Thunderfoot 1 and 2 killed the Georgia promotion for Ole, by the way.
Thunderfoot 1 and 2, then they get beat by the Mulkeys, and the Mulkeys get into the Crockett Cup. So it's just
Mulkey Mania running wild, bro.
Mulkey Mania. I think they're actually still wrestling, but
I believe.
But before we go on to before we talk about the entire 85, the Gathering, was there anything else leading up to Starrcade 85 that kind of stuck out that you thought, would, if you were a fan back then?
Well, you gotta go back. Let's go back, and you have to go back and watch the entire Magnum Tully angle.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, that's what I was actually. I don't know why.
Because this match in particular is what makes Magnum a star.
But did you? I loved it whenever. I mean, I love Magnum. He great wrestler, great promo, but Tully and Baby Doll. I'm not a fan of Baby Doll, the Perfect 10, as Tony Schiavone happens to say every time he says Tully Blanchard with his Perfect 10 Baby Doll. I know that's her moniker and her gimmick, but the whole, remember they had it where she came out and was talking to Magnum, gave him his business, the business card, and then he gave him the old Magnum kiss, and then Tully came out there and started beating the shit out of each other, and then David Crockett got involved in that. It's kind of funny as we, looking retrospectively, in 2018, that they had this major feud, and then, Magnum is the one who raised Tully Blanchard's daughter, Tessa Blanchard. It's just rather weird, but the things that he said about Magnum, I mean, he could cut a great promo on. I mean,
that's heat. It's his heat.
He did.
And it only works because Magnum was getting so much over at that point.
Yeah, I mean, because Tully, you could tell,
no one likes Tully. He's like the most punchable face in wrestling. Like, he could never make him a baby face. Like, he would have to put him underneath a mask or something.
Yeah, he would never be a great, but he mentioned about Magnum, how he had to, something about women and just a lot of things about how he took advantage of Baby Doll, and he said, that's how you have to get women, take advantage of. It's just
But, I mean, there's a lot of references to to like I guess there's an area in Atlanta where there's a lot of strip clubs. I guess they actually mentioned that street. That's the strip clubs and like that's where Magnum hangs out and stuff like that.
But okay, well, a side note. This has nothing to do with
You don't talk about strip clubs in Atlanta now because that'd be awesome.
No, no. But this was back in the I'd say mid '80s, early '90s. My dad on a business trip. He I don't know why he was at this strip club, but he met Tony Schiavone, Lex Luger, Sting. I think Flair was there, and got him to sign a piece of paper. Of course, I lost.
I think it would say like a pair of panties or something. That'd been amazing.
No, but it's just. But yes, they did frequent the strip clubs. But the thing that bothered me about Tully Blanchard was that damn U.S. title. You didn't like the silver version of the? It's like the silver version of the NWA title. Were they going for? Because I know the national tag team titles and the national title, they were all silver, correct?
Yeah.
Were they going for that same look? I mean,
they were going for. I think the way they had it was that your major titles would have been gold. Your secondary titles were in silver.
Yeah,
was kind of the idea. Now that belt, I've seen better U.S. belts. I've seen worse U.S. belts. I know people like the one with the big flag on, not the big map of the United States on. I know people like that title. I'm not personally a fan. I'm a big fan of the two titles that come after this. So there's two, they make a new U.S. title and then a U.S. Then you have the one you see in the '90s with like Luger and stuff like that, which are really nice belts.
Yeah.
This one's I mean, it's just basically a silver version of Dome Globe.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny about this match, the I Quit match in the cage. They were putting it off because, of course, Bob Geigel said the NWA was not going to sanction this match, and then I guess they got a lot of fan mail and Jim Crockett, came out on TV with Tony Schiavone and said, "Hey,
Can we say that Bob Geigel is the worst wrestling authority figure next to Lord James Blears, who I hate with a passion?
How about Jack Tunney? Is he?
I like Jack on the take Tunney. He was not bad.
God rest his soul.
I'm a Watts guy personally. I like Watts as the authority figure. So I think he does it really well.
You're not a Vince Russo?
I just threw up in my mouth. Sorry.
Hey, I mean, folks, if you don't,
I don't necessarily mind his writing as I'm not critical of his writing as much as other people are. I don't like him as an on TV figure at all.
Hey, but remember, not the Retro Wrestling Rewind Legends Spotlight that we had last week, but the episode number 7, or actually episode number 6. You thought that you may have had a run-in with him at a video.
Yes, because his video store is literally it was a video store they owned in the early '90s as the next town over from me.
I mean, you could have been something. He could have said, "Hey, kid."
You know what's funny about Vince Russo? I'm from New York, right? I'm from Long Island. I'm where I live where he's from. Do I talk like Vince Russo? Do I say bro all the time? No one talks like that. It's just not. It's a gimmick. It's a word. We don't talk that way.
I mean, you're into your profession whenever everything in your life is a gimmick. I'm just saying. But speaking of great gimmicks, let's start talking about Starrcade '85, The Gathering. It's, as they say, it's the great. Going back to Ole Anderson before we start talking about the show, he's not a fan of Jim Crockett. He's like Jim Crockett.
Ole hates everybody.
Yeah, he hates everybody, but it's just I think he was saying, hey, you're making every Starrcade better, and then you signed this match for the national tag team titles and for the NWA for the U.S. title. It's just. I mean, Ole, he was a great wrestler, a great promo man. But let's go into the funny thing is on the card that I posted on Twitter at the RW Rewind. There's one match that I don't think they actually have on the card. It's the I'm not sure which match it is. I'll have to figure it out. But what were your overall thoughts before we go into the show on Starrcade '85, The Gathering?
Starrcade '85 is better than WrestleMania 1, WrestleMania 2, Wrestling Classic, the big event.
So the Championship Wrestling from Florida's Battle of the Belts.
I mean, we can see where okay, in terms of match qualities and even angles, I think that the NWA at this time had a better feel about how to put together big cards. Although when we talk about the main event, is where they lose it for me on this one, and the aftermath for that. But you know, WrestleMania 1, right, which takes place a couple of months, prior to this, right? About 6, 7 months prior to this. They're still having, it's like an MSG house show. This is like a legitimate supercard here.
Yeah. I mean, it was definitely, it was definitely a great show. The match that they don't have on the at least the version that I have from the network is Don Cornado versus Tommy Lane.
I want to say those was dark because there's three of them. There's the Denny Brown versus Rocky King match, Don Cornado versus Tommy Lane, and then Thunderfoot and Italian Stallion and Pez Watley and Mike Grant.
And of course,
I think those were dark.
Well, I mean, are they out there anywhere? Is it matches that you could never, if you?
I don't know. I mean, unless they played them on TV,
yeah,
which they might have. But again, they're nothing of any note.
No.
I feel like Denny Brown was like world junior heavyweight champion.
Yeah, he was he was definitely for the Alabama junior heavyweight champion. That was.
And I'm a Rocky King mark personally, so.
And he actually has a school here in Atlanta now. So
all right.
So if you ever come down here, you can go to the first match we had. Vladimir. Crusher Khrushchev versus Sam Houston. Got some. My glasses are being repaired, so I have some older glasses, so my vision is kind of blurry tonight. But we will trudge on. What were your thoughts on this?
Can I talk about how much I dislike Sam Houston as a wrestler? Now, I'm pretty sure he's pretty good as a human being. Maybe not. I don't know. I'm sure he worked hard. I think he's terrible in the ring. I hate his face. I can smell him through the TV for some reason. And I don't like there's a couple of wrestlers that I don't like, right? I mean, I just want to change the channel when I see them. Okay. Like Sheamus would be a modern example of that currently. I hate Sam Houston, and I was so happy that Crusher Khrushchev, Repo Man, Demolition Smash, what have you, won the vacant Mid-Atlantic title in this match. Again, Russ Tyler was the champion prior to this, and he just left the promotion.
I thought that the current WWE product had a lot of belts, but the NWA, they had they had a lot of titles that you never heard about. Like, I was doing my research on future shows. They had
the Western States Heritage Championship.
Hey, that was Barry Windham and Larry Zbyszko, who actually I met at a show. Super nice guy. He
Larry Zbyszko will talk your ear off if you let him.
Yeah,
I've met him twice.
And you know why? The other person that'll talk your ear off is Jim Cornette. I met him at a show in Rome, Georgia. He gave me a compliment, but it was kind of a dig. He said I was the smartest man in Rome, Georgia, because I was doing the ring announcing at the time, and I told him where he was going to do a signing. I was like thinking to myself now, it's like, that's not really an insult. That's actually an insult, not a compliment, because not many smart people in Rome, Georgia, but I
met Jimmy in Midtown Manhattan, right? Which, again, if you know anything about Jimmy, he hates New York, he hates North. He probably really hated being in Midtown Manhattan. I did buy a autographed picture from him, and they forgot to take my money. So I'm sitting here saying, please, Mr. Cornette, take my money, because you forgot to take it. Here.
Hey, you know who will sign your 8x10 for probably $50? Virgil. Do you hate Virgil too?
I haven't met Virgil. I see Virgil all the time. Would it be Olive Gardens, Subways, and what have you? I just run away from Virgil. He once almost cornered me in a bathroom. Him and Chavo Guerrero. That's a whole other story for a different time.
Whoa! Whoa! What were your thoughts on the next match? We had Ron Bass taking on Black Bart.
I was sad to see this because I really like their team. I thought Ron Bass was a hell of a tag team. In terms of the match, it's a good old fashioned bull rope match. I mean, Ron Bass gets the win here. He gets his 5 minutes with J.J. Dillon in the ring, beats the hell out of him. Standard fare at the time. Again, you had this team who they broke up. and they're engaged in a feud again. There's another feud match, so this had some build behind it, and I'm a big fan of Outlaw Ron Bass personally. So
You don't hate him like you do Sam Houston.
no, I hate fucking Sam Houston.
So you would have probably been really mad if I had announced on our picks offline that I wanted to cover Sam Houston.
I mean, I'll do a career retrospect on Sam Houston where I just bury him for 45 minutes straight.
Yeah. But the next match wasn't really a match. It was James J. Dillon in a bull rope match against Black Bart.
No, Ron Bass.
I mean, Ron Bass. Sorry, I cannot see tonight. Sorry.
I think a lot of people forget that JJ was originally a wrestler. Well, he started as a referee, then became a wrestler, and then became a manager.
Not a very good wrestler, but
he was. I've seen matches of him in Detroit, where he's actually halfway decent. This is like mid 70s, so he's actually not bad in the ring. And he would often times, but when he had to wrestle matches when he was a manager, he purposely looked inept as a wrestler on purpose. So he was like, because I'm a manager trying to be a wrestler, I'm not going to have these guys sell for me or anything. It'd be ridiculous.
I mean,
he's not wrong. He's not wrong.
No, but if you've ever heard, if you've ever listened to What Happened When with Tony Schiavone and Conrad Thompson, Conrad, it may be a work or it could be a shoot. I'm not sure. He says every time James J. Dillon talks, he puts people to sleep.
Because he's almost as long-winded as me. So he will tell one story and it'll take him an hour and a half. That's legitimate. But the story is actually pretty riveting.
I mean, I'm sure it is. The next match also involved James J. Dillon. He was with Nature Boy, not Ric Flair, but Nature Boy.
I just want to make it clear to everyone that we're going out of order here. What we're doing here is we're doing all the Greensboro shows first, and then we're going to do all the Atlanta shows.
Yes. See,
so if they're following along, like what the hell's going on? So they went back and forth. So they did one match from Greensboro and the next match from the Omni. But the next match was Buddy Landel, who pinned Terry Taylor to win the NWA National Championship in 17 minutes. And I always wonder about this with Buddy Landel. If Buddy wasn't the Nature Boy, I think his career would have been different. Because anytime you have Buddy Landel and Ric Flair and the same company, I think the only way for Buddy to get over is Rick has to be a babyface. If they're both heels or they're both babyfaces, that's not going to work. And I think because the character of Buddy Landel, the Nature Boy, right? Tully Blanchard is the same kind of character as Buddy Landel and Ric Flair. He just didn't call himself Nature Boy Tully Blanchard, right? Cocky, arrogant, with the money and the girls and that kind of stuff. I understand that. But I think it hurt Buddy overall in the landscape of professional wrestling because he called himself the Nature Boy. Now, he had his own personal problems. He often gets fired from promotions every once in a while. Fantastic work in the ring. Terry Taylor, who's had some good stints here, would be in Mid-South or even here at Crockett. I think the match overall was actually really good, very fast-paced. This is probably Buddy Landel at his peak here. Some people will say Mid-South. I will disagree and say here. And again, this is the national championship. So this is like United States championship levels. This is like almost second from the top. So they're really pushing Buddy here. And then he would eventually screw it up and then get fired.
Yeah, I mean, I think he won the title one of the times. I don't think it was this time. And something happened and they stripped him of the title and they fired him. That was definitely the Nature Boy Buddy Landel. The next match at the Greensboro Coliseum, oh man, it was a freaking bloodbath. It was Magnum TA defeated Tully Blanchard with a Perfect 10 Baby Doll in a I Quit match for the Silver United States Heavyweight Championship. I mean, what were your thoughts? This is a brutal match. I mean, it was so much blood. It was just, I don't know.
This is not something you would often see on television at this time or even in years to come very often. Now, this would be something you would see in a house show back in the day, right? A blow up to a big feud like this. So to see this on closed circuit, because this is prior to pay-per-view, and for us to see it on tape, it's amazing. I mean, these guys work their ass off. They had the spot where Baby Doll throws in the wooden chair, and then Tully tries to stab Magnum in the head, and then Magnum reverses it, and then was basically grinding into his head. It's almost like have you ever seen Terry Funk versus Jerry Lawler, the Empty Arena match?
Mm-hmm.
It's almost reminiscent to that, essentially, just missing the I poke my eye out with the stick part. But again, it reminds me a lot of that. And these guys were going full bore for a while, and they would continue to feud after this too. So
I mean, out of all the matches, I think this was probably
this stole the show.
This
sure.
definitely stole the show. I mean, the next match was in a cage. The next match in Greensboro. Folks follow along at the house. We're just going over all the Greensboro Coliseum matches, and then we are switching back to the Omni in Atlanta. Of course, on the network and then on the tapes, they go back and forth. So don't want to confuse anybody. We had the Rock and Roll Express with the great Don Kernoodle. They defeated Ivan Koloff and Nikita Koloff for the NWA World Tag Team titles. Of course, Nikita and Ivan were seconded by Crusher Khrushchev. I'm a big fan of Ricky and Robert. I'm a fan of the heel, Nikita Koloff. Not a big fan of the babyface, flat top.
The hair,
the hair, Nikita.
If Nikita Koloff has a hair, you kind of just want to skip that match.
Yeah, I mean, he was good whenever he was with when they had to turn him babyface after Magnum's career and almost life-ending car accident. No. He was still a badass, but I like him as a heel. I mean, as a super heel. I mean, at the time they turned him babyface, he was a super heel, but then he just like clicked and people started. Do you find it funny how one week people are booing the shit out of Nikita Koloff, and then they team him with the American Dream Dusty Rhodes, and now he can do no wrong, and then he gets the United States title.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing that. We talked about this on the Starrcade 86 show about how, Dusty and his emergency panic booking was able to pull this off and have it work, which is amazing if you even think about it. Again, we're still in the midst of the Cold War. Obviously, we're still doing, Russian gimmicks galore. They're all over this show. They're all over wrestling at this point. And he was able to take, not a Russian sympathizer, not an American who likes Russia. We're talking about someone who is supposed to be legitimately Russian and actually, making them a babyface.
And actually spoke like he sounded Russian, unlike Crusher, who
Crusher was never Russian. He was never Russian. I
know that, but they
never said it on Crockett TV. They said it on Mid-South TV.
Well, but we will that's a whole separate thing. But my thing is back. That's why I love wrestling in the past, like in the 80s. Some 90s, but like early 80s to late 80s, the fans believed it. I mean, they
bought it.
Either
they believed it or they wanted to believe it.
I mean,
it didn't matter because it's the same feeling.
Every time there was a situation like the Cold War with the Soviets, the Iron Sheik, whoever. I mean, wrestling promoters played off that. It started.
They did it with the Japanese and the Nazis too.
Yeah, I mean, then they played off that. But it's one of those things that Vince has tried. He tried to do that.
He doesn't do that well, by the way.
No,
he does not do that. He does not do a foreign menace. He always does them as a cartoon or a caricature, and they always end up being a comedy fucking gimmick.
Like the
hashtag Nikolai Volkov, like hashtag Iron Sheik,
like the great Khali.
Khali, Jinder Mahal, who's lactating all over the place. It's ridiculous. Now you seen what they just did with him? Now he's like a non-violent like yogi now who does yoga and crap.
No,
he was your champion like a year ago.
I mean, it's terrible. I mean, it's
gross.
They're about to pull out of Saudi Arabia because of all that.
I don't know.
That crisis.
50-50.
Huh?
50-50. It's 50-50.
I mean, I think it's. I mean, I don't know. I took a poll at work with all my wrestling fans. They said, man, if they go into Saudi Arabia, it's going to be a terrible PR nightmare. But
I'm more concerned about the welfare of the wrestlers and the people.
Yeah. I mean, definitely on that. But I mean, it's just like Vince. That's what I will give Crockett and Dusty. The booking. They could book like the foreign gimmicks the yin yang, and they were good. But Vince trying to do it, it's just retarded. I mean,
It's comedy. He does it for laughs.
he tried to right after 9/11. It was no actually
Muhammad
it
Hassan.
was before. I think it was before 9/11. Or
no, it was after 9/11, but before the London tunnel bombing.
Yeah, and they try to do it like a terrorist gimmick. I'm like, really? That's a terrible idea. I mean, I don't
look
know.
at Slaughter in '91 for WrestleMania 7. The same thing.
Yeah, I mean, Sergeant Slaughter.
I almost killed their business too. I'm sorry.
Yeah, but moving on. What were your thoughts on this? I mean, the Rock and Roll Express.
Rock and Roll Express was probably the hottest tag team in the United States at this time. They're coming off that amazing Mid-South run with the Midnights. And they were smart enough to keep the Rock and Roll and Midnights apart for an extended period of time. So when they came together, it would be magic once again.
Yeah.
Coming in on their first night and then winning the championships on the first night. Again, that's an old Watts booking thing that he used to do all the time.
Yeah.
So you have your fresh person come in and win the championship the first night to get them over. And these guys were over immediately. And you can tell by the high screeching female screams and the crowds how over they legitimately were.
Yeah, I mean, they had a Rock and Roll Express fan club. I mean, it's like
I would think they were right under Hogan in terms of popularity at the time.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard some stories, but we're
they're all true.
They're true. They're damn true.
They had a van.
Oh, but no. Anyway, let's go on to the matches from the Omni in Atlanta, which that was actually
Speaking of, you're from the area. You ever go to the Omni?
I did. That's where I actually went to my first professional wrestling event. It was an NWA. It had a cage match. My grandmother who was alive at the time, it was back in mid 80s. She took me with my uncle. It was the first time I fell in love with wrestling. So it was mid 84, 85. It was, I think Dusty was in the main event. It was a cage match. It was awesome. But of course, they tore down the Omni, built Phillips Arena. Now they call it State Farm Arena because I guess Phillips decided not to sponsor.
If we get to speak to Bischoff, I want to ask him how come he stopped running the Omni in the mid '90s before it closed?
Hey,
because they stopped. They would run everything else. Macon, they would run every place except the Omni in Georgia. I'm like, how come you guys are not running the Omni?
I mean, the funny thing is about Macon, I went back to my research.
Stone Mountain Center and all those ridiculous places.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of places that I saw saw NWA and Smoky Mountain back in Atlanta. But speaking of like that, doing my research on some things that we're going to be talking about in the future, they had an NWA Macon Tag Team Championship. Where it only was defended in Macon. I'm like, really? It's like I live on Beacon.
How big is Macon in terms of a city?
I mean, good size. It's probably 100,000, 200,000 maybe. But okay. I mean, whenever they had them, they were probably a lot smaller. But it's just like having the. I live on Beacon Hill Boulevard. Maybe they have the Beacon Hill Boulevard title. I was just like, how many championships? I mean, they don't have any NWA titles now, but they're going to have a new national champion. I think
they recommissioned the women's title. Now that's active, so Jazz has that right now.
And then they're going to be getting a national championship, bringing that back. They're having a tournament on the 21st of this month in Nashville, and of course, it's going to be main evented by the rematch between Nick Aldis and the one, the only son of a plumber, the son of a plumber. Cody, don't call me Rhodes.
You ever notice that sometimes his hair is blonde and sometimes his hair is brown?
Yes.
And I wonder if he does that based on his, I guess, alignment.
No,
so
actually,
he seems to be more of a baby face when he's blonde. I don't know. It's weird.
I heard the blonde thing was because he's on that show, The Arrow, or he has a cameo on there, and I think it was because of that. But I kind of like. I do like the blonde. It kind of makes him look menacing. I don't know. That's just me.
I think if he's a heel, keep it blonde. If you're in a situation where you have to be babyface, go back to natural. And
speaking of menacing, the next match from the Omni in Atlanta, the great Manny Fernandez, the Raging Bull, with the finisher, the Flying Burrito, which does not seem like a legitimate name, but if
it's legitimate.
Yeah, if Tony,
cool.
I don't know. That just seems not PC, but I mean, we also.
I mean, if you look at it, look at your forearm, and then look at a burrito. Yes. Forearm burrito. Huh. Now I don't know what kind of burritos you eat. Like mine, the burritos I eat up here are literally the size of someone's forearm, so it makes sense.
Well, he speaking
As
of,
as a person of color myself, I am not offended by that.
oh, you're not. Well, I'm glad. Speaking of somebody that I used to have nightmares about that I want to have on the program, but because he lives in Atlanta and I know some people that know him. The
Did you ever
great
go to Abdullah's house of Chinese food and ribs?
I wanted to, but I heard you could get Hep C there, so I decided I wouldn't go there.
I don't know. It's 50-50. It might be worth it.
No, yeah, that sounds like I mean, that sounds like a terrible way to get that. But he was managed by Paul Jones in a Mexican death match, and the winner had to get the sombrero from that Manny Fernandez had. What were your thoughts on this match? This was just a clusterfuck. Entire show, the whole entire match.
It's Abby. So anytime you see Abby, it's going to be a treat. You know this, right? You're going to see violence. You're going to see someone bleed. He's going to stab someone in the head with a foreign object. Hopefully, it's a fork.
And it usually comes out of his pants, but
yeah, which is again, you're spreading diseases all over the place.
That's a whole different show about not diseases, but about how
I love as an attraction. I love Abdul the Butcher. I think he's amazing. Yeah. You know, if I had a promotion in the 80s, I would try to book Abby, as much as I could. Not every week, because you can't have Abby on your show every week because he looks ridiculous. But if you need a big villain to come in and get some heat on an aspiring, young, good-looking babyface, fucking have Abby come in and just carve him up for a while.
Well, speaking of the next match, this guy, superstar Billy Graham.
This is nonsense. Okay, I know. The next match is Billy Graham versus the Barbarian, right? Which starts out in an arm wrestling match, right?
Yeah.
Which is something that I can't stand in professional wrestling. There's two things that I can't stand in professional wrestling.
Sam Houston.
Sam Houston to the side here for a moment. Arm wrestling matches, because they always kind of end up the same way, which is just like it happened here. And your obligatory boxing match. I hate those with such a passion that it makes my penis soft. I don't even know what to tell you guys. It is that awful.
Well, folks, that'll end the program. No, the thing that I hate those kind of matches. The thing I hated they did in the '80s. It was with the Road Warriors and the Powers of Pain. They did that the bench press challenge, and then they crushed Animal's face, and they had a mat. That was ridiculous.
It's one thing to do it like they did it a couple times at WWF like on prime time to get guys over or whatever, but to kind of build an angle out of it. It's just tired and it's even tired for 1985. I mean, that's something that's straight out of the 70s would be the arm wrestling, boxing, and weightlifting in general. Yeah, I think this is Billy Graham's last match as a capable performer. I don't think he has any other good matches, and I wouldn't even consider this that good. No. But he's capable in this match. Yeah. After this, he's done. He gets spots and he gets runs, but he's done after this match. And Barbarian is still young and in his prime, and they should really. It's almost sad that they, from when he came to Georgia '83 or late '83, early '84. They just really never really did anything with him. He just hangs out with Paul Jones most of the time.
Yeah, number one, Paul Jones. But he, in some of those promos that he had leading up to Starrcade '85, The Gathering, he was red in the face. He really got into his gimmick.
Yeah.
I mean, of course, then they had him wrestle the Barbarian. I mean, I don't know why they had an arm wrestling match and then the next
for no reason. It's is Barbarian known as a arm wrestler? Billy Graham, you probably get away with it a little bit. It's not like he's, let's say, Billy Jack Haynes or Hercules Hernandez or Scott Norton or even Rick Rude, who was actually an arm wrestling champion or what have you. This is the Barbarian. He's supposed to be a barbarian. That you're gonna have him arm wrestle? Seriously? It's so stupid.
The other thing that's kind of dumb is the Barbarian shows up, in the weeks before with a cast on his hand. Paul Jones kind of explains that Billy Graham turned on Paul Jones and then he hit the Barbarian with a chair. But of course, you never see this. No. So it's just like one of those things. It's like, did the Barbarian actually have an injury, and that what they were writing off as that, or is this another Dusty saying, "Hey,
we have Billy Graham. We need to do an arm wrestling match." I mean, I guess.
God.
But yeah, it's awful. I mean, yeah, I'm trying to find a way to kind of excuse it, and I can't.
No,
I can't justify this. Just have the 5-minute match and have Billy go over.
Yeah, well, I mean, the next match was a little better. The Minnesota Wrecking Crew, Ole and Arn Anderson, they defeated. They were the champions. They were the national tag team champions. They defeated the current reigning and defending at the time United States champion, the United States tag team champions, Wahoo McDaniels, as they call him for some reason, and Billy Jack Haynes. What were your thoughts on this match?
When I'm watching the show, I'm like, when the hell did Wahoo turn babyface? I don't even remember that.
Yeah, I mean, he was a great heel. I mean,
he was a heel all through '84, feuding with Flair.
Yeah.
So I'm like, when did he become? I'm not sure. Billy Jack is Billy Jack. Billy Jack's gonna last 6 months in your promotion. He's gonna look great. He's gonna get over to the degree, and then he's gonna go crazy and leave. That's what happened here. That's what happened in WWF. That's what happens when he comes back. That's what happens in Portland. That's what happens in Puerto Rico. That's what happens in Florida. That's what happens in WCW when he's what was he, Black Blood? It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Poor Billy Jack Haynes. Again, I wish him all the best when he's not, being a contract killer for politicians and what have you.
Whoa. Whoa.
That's his story, not mine. I can't even say alleged. He said it.
God. But, it was a good match. I mean, it was not of course, not the best match on the show. But
I'm just curious about why Ole and Arn are in this spot and not feuding with, I guess, a more
like the Rock and Roll Express.
Yeah, but they do the extra though, so I understand why they're not here. Like they should be like against like Terry Taylor and Sam Houston or something.
You really
so
wanted Sam
beat
Houston.
The hell out of
yeah, I mean it is kind of funny how they were in a in a cage match against the Rock and Rolls next year in '86. Well, we had covered that earlier in an earlier program, but next match. The next match is an there's a man and a woman wrestling together.
Supposedly.
Yes, supposedly. Jimmy Valiant and Miss Atlanta Lively with top heavy Big Mama. They defeated the Midnight Express of Bob Eaton and Dennis Condrey with a lovable and the guy who could talk your ear off, Jim Cornette. What are your thoughts on this? I mean,
do you see what the Midnights are wearing in this match?
Yes.
It's amazing. That's the most amazing thing about that match is what the Midnights are wearing.
It's just, I mean,
the Midnights would feud with Ronnie for a while, and then they set his face on fire, and then that's how they turned Jimmy Garvin.
Yeah, I don't understand. This whole Miss Atlanta Live. It's like you're also wrestling as Ron Garvin, the man with the hands of stone, or as David Crockett.
When did they had intergender matches with? I don't know if this year or the following year, where Mystery Blue would come in and like beat up Cornette, and then Cornette would get beat up by Baby Doll at some point too. So they were always kind of doing these situations where I'm assuming here, if I remember the TVs correctly, that I guess they knew that Ron Garvin was Miss Atlanta Lively, and they want to get revenge on Ronnie here, so they're going to have this match. And the Midnights know it's a farce anyway, so that's why they're dressed ridiculous in the match too. But again, for not, it's not their debut, but this is like their first really big match for the NWA here. And it's kind of sad to see the Midnights in this spot. I mean, they're going to be your top heel tag teams in relatively short order. And like why can't this be Jimmy Valiant and Ronnie Garvin at this point?
Yeah, I mean,
you don't need all the extra gimmicks on them.
It was kind of one of those filler matches, but the main event of the part in Atlanta for the NWA title, the Nature Boy Ric Flair taking on Dusty Rhodes. Yep. Dusty Rhodes defeated him, but there's a caveat to that. Would you like to tell everyone what that caveat is?
It's some bullshit. So basically what happened is that Tommy Young would come out, and I believe it was next week on television, and not reverse the match because Dusty still wins, but Dusty wins by disqualification because Arn Anderson interfered, which is crap. And this is where Dusty's booking starts falling apart when he gets to these main event level where you need to blow this off. You need to have a conclusive winner. He does not do that well. It's his weakness, right? So instead of having Dusty just beat Flair here, which he should have, Dusty wins the match here. The Horsemen form, and then they go after Dusty. That's pretty much how it should have went. Instead of putting Dusty wins, so the people in Atlanta are happy, and then they watch TV the next week and like, what the fuck? Yeah. So you hurt your town that way, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, it
So they
was.
could have done a scenario like this. Even if like you want to do something kabuki-ish, what you could have done instead of giving the belt back to Flair, hold the belt up, have a tournament, and then have the Horsemen interfere and get Dusty counted out in one of the tournament matches, and then you can put the belt back on Flair that way. At least that would give you 6 weeks of TV out of this.
Yeah, it's. I mean, it was. I mean, it was some bullshit. I mean, it was a good match, but I mean, Dusty's going to win the title.
He still thinks he's booking a territorial NWA champion, not a national promotion champion, and he's still stuck. And everything else he did, he's progressive as hell. When it comes to the world champion, especially Ric Flair in particular, he's still booking like it's 1975, not 1985.
Yeah, I mean, it was a. I mean, it was a good show. I mean, overall, I mean,
It's a fantastic show. I mean, again, if you just watch the show and don't know what happened after with this, you're like, oh, that's fucking amazing. That's awesome.
Yeah, not
but
so much.
you got to talk about the aftermath of what happened there, because that's such an important piece. And with the Horsemen, forming after this and all that kind of good stuff, it's like it's really your first glimpse of what Crockett's known for, like what they're going to be in the next 2 years.
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely. I mean, it was.
Because if you watch '84 Crockett, it's crap. Don't watch '84 Crockett.
No, we will not be covering '84 Crockett, but we kind of put our noggins together, and I kind of want to reveal, behind the curtain. So, kind of what we're going to be covering for the next couple weeks. Your pick next week was WrestleMania 2. Yeah, you shit on it, but you want to cover it.
Hey, we got to take the good with the bad.
Yeah, I mean,
and I'm gonna tease something for you guys here. The main event of WrestleMania 2, as everyone knows, Hulk Hogan versus King Kong Bundy in Los Angeles inside of a steel cage for the WWF World Heavyweight Championship. I have a better main event for you guys. So tune in next time where you can hear me rebook the main event of WrestleMania 2 and have that show actually be good. So check that out.
Well, I cannot wait to hear that. Then we have Clash of the Champions 31. We have Halloween Havoc 95. Wrestle War
Monster Trucks.
Halloween
Havoc 95.
Wrestle War 89, which is actually a good show. You picked AWA Super Sunday show. Why'd you pick that?
Because that show is underratedly important. Because everyone talks about Starrcade being their first super show, their first pay-per-view like show. Again, those shows were not on pay-per-view, right?
Yeah.
But like what we would know pay-per-views going forward, and that's supposedly the first one. But Super Sunday predates that show.
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely. And then in the coming weeks, we also cover Ricky and Robert, the Rock and Roll Express. We may have something special coming up on that episode. Then we cover Super Brawl 2, Clash 1. You picked the Royal Rumble 1989. What were your thoughts on that show?
That's a personal favorite of mine because when I was 8 years old for my birthday, my sister bought me that tape, and I've watched that show 10,000 times. It's in the middle of the Mega Powers exploding angle. There's no other right answers for the greatest feud of all time. It's the Mega Powers explodes, followed by Austin McMahon. The Mega Powers number one.
All right, and then we have the formation of the Four Horsemen, the Bunkhouse Stampede 1988, Bash 87, and then we tap it all off. Episode number 20 will be the Championship Wrestling from Florida, Battle of the Belts. Hey, if anybody would like to watch your YouTube channel or follow you on social media, how can they do that?
Well, they can find me on YouTube at Retro Wrestling Games. Again, just type that in with the first thing that pops up. You can see such videos. We just recently did WrestleMania, the arcade game. I did a review on the RoboCop arcade game. We have the NWA 1984 project. The last show we did was our Puerto Rican Spectacular over at Puerto Rico. So lots of cool stuff going on over there. In addition, you can follow me on Twitter. That's at RW Games Presents. I'm a good follow. I'm constantly on there. You can ask any questions. You can DM me. You can share cool pictures with me. Whatever. I'm very active on there, so it's all good.
Yeah, you're definitely a big fan of that. And also, you can follow us on Twitter at the RW Rewind. That's on Twitter. We're gonna have all of these information about the shows that we're gonna be covering, and kind of asking the fans, who do you want us and what do you want us to cover in the next couple weeks? And of course, you can always log on to the RetroWrestlingRewind.com. It's all going to be in the show notes. Click on below, folks. It's another great episode. Alex G, man, Starrcade 85. It's in the books. Next week, it's going to be WrestleMania 2. I just
Hey, do you think The Gathering, do you think Dusty named that after, like, Highlander?
Maybe.
I think so.
I don't know. We'll have to research that and look into that too and kind of delve into that later on. But for the great Alex G, I am, as always, David Fine. We will see you back here next week as we cover the beginning, the middle, and the end of WrestleMania 2 right here on the Retro Wrestling Rewind, exclusively on iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher, and online at RetroWrestlingRewind.com. We'll see you back here next week.